Hello, and welcome to another episode of PPC Unfiltered, where you're lucky if you got here because I don't optimize these, I don't promote them, you just land in my feed, and here we are. So I saw this post on LinkedIn saying, essentially, you should only hire people that grew $1,000 budget in paid search and not the ones who manage multi-million-dollar accounts. And I just about fell out of my chair. Yes, okay, because props to those scrappy people who grew $1,000 accounts. It's hard. It is mind-numbingly hard work, and you know that the business owner on the other end of that is dying for that to work. That is a hard skill, and I'm not going to minimize that. However, let me tell you, managing multi-million-dollar budgets, that's a whole different battlefield, and it's definitely not easier. It's brutal, and I'm going to walk you through it because I want people to know what it is truly like managing for a large brand that everyone has heard of. You are under executive level scrutiny, and when I say scrutiny, I'm saying that you're not talking to the business owner anymore. In fact, I can't ever even imagine getting to the business owner for some of the brands that I worked with. They are probably famous or living in their trust funds. I can't even imagine where those people are right now. So anyway, you're presenting decks to CMOs, VPs, marketing directors. Every single thing that you recommend, everything you say in Google Ads has to tie back to the entire overall marketing strategy, brand, TV, print, PR, everything. You are on calls with every single stakeholder. Sometimes that's all in your agency if you're lucky. Other times you're working across multiple agencies. You are not just making ads in Google. You're defending the entire role of search and the whole machine, and try adding PMAX to that and demand gen and everything. Every time something changes and a marketing director says, oh my gosh, are we going to do demand gen? Are we going to do AI Max? I heard about it. Talking to XYZ executive in the corporate lounge somewhere. You are tying everything back to a whole overarching strategy. It is like trying to move an elephant when we're talking about big brands. You also have stakeholder chaos. You have traffic managers, brand managers, marketing directors, CMOs, and all of them have different priorities. Half the time you're answering questions like, why did this ad show up here, from someone who's never even logged into Google Ads in their life. You're managing people's opinions as much as you're managing campaigns. A lot of people have preconceived notions about how they think Google Ads works and then want to know the answers. For example, one time I was on the call with a brand manager who wanted to know how much brand search had grown over the years. Well, that's a really hard question to answer when brand search is being absorbed now by PMAX, some of the DSA, some of the broad match. Yes, we tried to keep brands centered in brand, but we had just rolled out PMAX before brand exclusions existed. So I could no longer say that brand search grew and use that as a barometer to how well they were doing growing their messaging. So again, these are hard questions. You have to have a solid answer. You can't just beat around the bush. You have to answer the question and help and make sure that they're satisfied based on their goals. So people are constantly managing those expectations. You have a lot of political pressure. So in small accounts, if something doesn't work and you tweak it, then hopefully it'll get better. In big accounts, if sales dip, the entire sales, right? Not just in your paid search account, the CEO or the CMO sees a competitor ad, you're getting chewed out, even when it's completely out of your control. You're constantly defending why your strategy is sound. You're also making a deck every time you do a strategy shift or a strategy change because you have to turn around and sell that. I remember one time I wanted to get a non-brand campaign going and I had to make an entire deck talking about non-brand, why I felt like it was the place to scale. It happened to be at a time when Performance Max was just coming around, so we ended up putting non-brand on, and Performance Max ended up taking that traffic. It is something that you constantly have to be thinking about selling. And then not only do you have to present your strategy, but you have to get complete and utter sign-off at every single level for your strategy, making sure it aligns up top. The budget complexity. Everyone thinks that big budgets are easier because you just get to spend more. Wrong. You're actually splitting money across multiple products, regions, promos, and flights. You're projecting the rep ROI like 6 months out, sometimes a year out. And then when the money is flighted out, you're basically betting on your projections. And then you're going to have to defend those later to your finance team. So like, oh, you asked for $200,000 for the spring launch. What ended up happening? What did I get for that $200,000? You are making sure that every single thing is aligned. You also, speaking of this, have to deal with media flights and turnarounds. So small business run their ads all year round. Big brands, they flight around launches, promos, seasons. That means you're constantly doing turn-ons, turn-offs, shut-offs, ramp-ups. If you mess something up, millions are wasted or gone because if the flight doesn't go at a certain time, you're then having to spend, $20,000 in a 2-week period. And you don't even know that Google is going to take your money at that point. And if the client loses that budget that they fought for, then they don't get their budget back. So it's dealing with a lot of this. That is why when Google comes out with things like budget caps or so I think they came out with something like a flight, you could say, for 3 weeks, this is how much I want to spend, and they'll even it out through the entire year. I hear a lot of paid search experts say, oh my gosh, why would they do that? But if you're working with big budgets, it is, spend that money or lose that money. And sometimes, you're putting 20, 30 into demand gen because you just want to make sure that campaign spends. I know, again, it makes it look easy when you're sitting in a position of managing small accounts because you say, oh my gosh, I'd love to just throw it into demand gen. But no, you really do have to come back and justify it and then say, okay, what does this ROAS? Why did we do that? Why did we spend it? Why did we make this choice? So, sometimes you're in between a rock and a hard place a lot of times with the way that they flight out their campaigns. Approval bottlenecks. So I talked about the flight campaigns. Well, imagine, again, if every single headline, description, ad created had to be approved by legal, brand, compliance, whoever else. So absolutely nothing goes live without a complete and utter sign-off. So imagine trying to launch Performance Max with every single asset that they want and having to get, 20 images, 15 headlines. You're absolutely still to this day making that ad copy in a spreadsheet, putting together a template, a provisioning document, getting it over to client, getting that through the brand managers, legal and compliance, and anyone else that needs to see that. So forget about like a quick pivot. Sometimes it takes weeks and weeks to get a single campaign or a single ad out the door. Also, high stakes reporting. Don't think that you're just sending over a report. No, you're building entire decks. Before and after a flight, you're building a measurement plan before and after a flight. So I have to take an entire campaign that I may be running for 2 or 3 weeks. I have to put together a measurement plan so every single stakeholder is in agreement. Like, we're not judging by impressions here, or sometimes we are judging by impressions. We are measuring towards store visits, or we are measuring towards ROAS, or, this time, I hate to say it, but we are looking at the CTR in this case, or the views, something even harder to control in YouTube. So again, you're looking at different metrics, you're documenting why you're looking at those metrics, and you're literally defending why search is better than TV or CTV. You're comparing CTMs to broadcast. You're telling the story about why Google Ads deserves a better budget share. You're up against Amazon a lot of times if you're working for big retailers. Why Google over Amazon? And you're on the phone talking to the CMO about it. Google reps are also a higher level, and let's not forget about them, because when you're small, you get these calls. I know we talk about it all the time. Google is calling you all the time, but when you're working for a big brand like this, you do get senior reps who join the client call. They sometimes are meeting with the client directly once a week, and they have zero problem pitching something to your client that was something you've never heard of before. And they also are held to certain standards. They want to increase Google's revenue, and they'll throw you under the bus without hesitation. I remember one time I was sitting on a call, my Google rep got on and presented an entirely new framework for running our Google ads. Meanwhile, I had my whole creative team develop an entire series of ads for an entire lifestyle over, 6 months, and my Google rep wanted to change the way we built the campaigns. So again, you have to watch that. You have to make sure that you keep your Google rep who is at a higher level, happy and satisfied. You don't want to just throw them under the bus, because a lot of times the Google rep, I'll just say it, is getting better, different type of service, helping you, but they also have their goals as well. Big accounts almost always have multiple agencies. I've talked about that: creative, PR, analytics, different departments. So you're really coordinating with 5 different teams and protecting their turf. So half of the battle is making sure that everyone's on the same page. The PR team might be running something and want to know, hey, are we seeing these search terms coming back through in Google? We want to justify what we've been doing. The social team, they may be running influencer marketing. Well, are we getting searches coming back based on that? There's a lot of different questions, a lot of different balls in the air, a lot of people that deeply care about what is coming in through Google, since Google is still one of the lion shares of the spend at most major advertisers. Testing at scale. So we always talk about testing. Testing isn't just swapping out a headline and saying, okay, that worked. No, you're running tests at scale that have to be statistically significant. You're testing incrementality against a dashboard. Like if we spend more on Facebook, does Google go up and down? You need a formal plan, a hypothesis, controls, and then you have to present the results back to your client like it's a science fair. You have to follow the rules here. Metric and measurements hassles. One thing that's absolutely wonderful is those tags. I have an entire tech team that would put the tags on for me. I don't have to worry about that. But then you're answering questions. Google Ads doesn't match Google Analytics. Google Analytics doesn't match Adobe. Adobe doesn't match the BI tool. It really gets deep there, and it's a huge headache. But you want to make sure you don't say, oh, just don't look at that. You can't just give a trivial answer. You really have to satisfy it. So you end up becoming a jack of all trades, or pulling in your analytics people and having these conversations to make sure that everyone understands that we have one clean source of truth, a number that the CMO can take to the board and make a decision with, and highlight that we're not completely failing this test. Measurement and insight expectations are also huge. So if you're not just reporting on search, right? That is clearly, like I said, a big part of the pie, but you're expected to tell them if TV is working. So how in Google we have a lot of insights that come in that might say this in-market audience is converting at a 1.8 times, standard audiences. There's a lot of insight that's going to put into Performance Max especially. And a lot of this you have to be feeding back to the CMO, because it's telling them, oh yeah, my ads over on the Golf Channel are actually working. They're spending millions over there too. You want to be telling them, is Facebook working? You want to be pulling in insights from Google Ads to explain why someone else's channel is working, because leadership wants that absolutely 100% full view of what's going on. So the stuff that small businesses essentially call fluff, here you really have to dig in for real signals. You also have to make much tighter projections. I did an entire talk at Brighton before PPC Hero about projections. These are really important. In small accounts, you can test and see. In big accounts, leaderships want to know for every single dollar exactly what do we get, and you're really held to it. So if you forecast $5 million in revenue over Black Friday, you only deliver $4.6 million. Guess what? You're in the hot seat. It is your turn to answer those questions. Date magnitude. If you screw up on a $1,000 account, I don't know what the retainer is on something like that. Let's just hypothetically say they're paying a $1,000 retainer. Maybe you lose that client. It stinks. Maybe you wasted $2,000. You spent a little over budget. It's a lot in proportion. But if you screw up a $5 million account, you could spend $20,000 overnight. Actually, guess what? I've seen it happen. I've seen an entire campaign I've seen in Facebook where someone's put in a budget that was meant to be a month in a one-day budget, and the VP wants to know why. And guess what? You're losing that client for the agency. 20 people are going to get laid off. So it's really high stakes. You really have to have that QA, and it's the kind of pressure that you really don't forget. Fundamentally, managing a $1,000 account, I don't want to poo-poo on that. That is a big flex. That is hard. But managing a $5 million account, these are completely different skill sets. $1,000, you're scrappy, clever hack, squeezing absolutely everything out of a tight budget is absolutely perfect for small businesses. I think that's a skill that can absolutely be marketed and celebrated. But $5 million, that's strategy, that's communication, that's political navigation, that's precision execution. Neither are better. They're just different games. And what I like to do is bring in my experience with big advertisers to the smaller advertisers, because a lot of times they don't really get to see what's on the other side, and they think that for some reason it's easier on my side. It is absolutely not. So do not discount the people who scaled a $1,000 budget. That's, like I said, a huge flex. But also don't you dare dismiss people like me who've managed multi-million-dollar accounts. Both take a skill set. Both are incredibly hard. Both are stressful. And pretending like that big budget management is easy because the Google Ads side feels easy, that's just ignorance. And the next time I see a post like that, I'm going to be bringing a bigger rant. So thanks for joining Google Ads Unfiltered. I've been wanting to do this one for quite some time, and I really appreciate every single person that took the time to listen and give this consideration, because there'll be more of this to come. And you're lucky it landed on your feed.